We are here as part of Miss Media Group for Girl Scout Day at the Capitol, interviewing Representative Mandy Ballinger. My name is Naya Solomon, and I am a 6th grade cadet in Fulton County, Georgia.
My name is Jasmine Lewis, and I am a 10th grade Girl Scout senior in Cherokee County, Georgia. Representative Ballinger from Canton in Cherokee County is my state representative. Thank you so much, Representative Ballinger, for taking time out of your busy schedule to allow Girl Scouts an opportunity to go behind the scenes and talk a little bit about politics. Girl Scouts here in the state of Georgia come to the Capitol on the special Girl Scout Day one time a year to get a feeling of what it might be like to work here and be an active citizen in everyday government, in hopes that someday many girls will aspire to be someone like you who strive to change our community. What events led up to you pursuing your role in politics?
Well, I ran for my political office really as more of an outgrowth out of community service. I've been very involved in our community. I worked as a victim advocate with the prosecuting attorney's office, so really it was more my desire to serve the community rather than a political ideology.
What inspiration can you give Girl Scouts that want to be like you and pursue politics?
I hope to inspire by leading, and I hope to inspire by doing. The legislation that I've carried has helped protect our children. It's helped protect our domestic violence victims. It's helped protect our victims of violent crime. And that's what I hope will serve as inspiration so that people can understand that they can have a very viable impact on their communities by serving in the legislature.
How do you run a winning campaign, and what might you do differently when you run in the future?
I am by nature very competitive. Whenever I initially ran for the House, I actually won a four-way without a runoff. So my joke to the Republican women is always, how many men does it take to beat a good woman? The answer is obviously more than three, because I beat three gentlemen whenever I was running. One was a Tea Party guy, one was the former party chair for our local county Republican Party, and the other one was a local businessman. So, you know, I think it is really important that women speak out and women become involved in the political process.
Have you ever worked or lived in another country or even visited?
I have traveled extensively in Europe, and I do believe that travel is one of the key aspects that makes people more well-rounded. I think it's really important for people to get a different perspective other than their own.
What did you notice about the government that was different from the United States, such as rules and regulations?
Well, I think probably the most notable difference that I noticed whenever I was traveling in Europe was the monarchy. You know, Spain, that I traveled in quite a bit, they have a monarchy. Britain obviously probably has the most well-known monarchy with Queen Elizabeth II currently on the throne over there. But a lot of our European partners actually have monarchies still. So, and that's, you know, they're on the money, you know, they don't have founding fathers. They have, you know, the king from way back when that actually founded the country. So I think that was probably one of the most distinguishing differences between the United States and our European partners.
Did their cultures and traditions play into these differences?
Well, obviously so, because they revere, they have the changing of the guard in Buckingham Palace, and a lot of those cultures and traditions are founded basically in the establishment that is the monarchy.
As Girl Scouts, we say on my honor. We say we will try. We give an oath to live out a life that is honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong. As Girl Scouts, we are responsible for what we say and what we do. Respect ourselves and others. We use our resources wisely and strive to make this world and our community a better place. We believe that living our lives this way will make us better citizens. In participating in such events as Girl Scout Day at the Capitol, we are learning what it means to be active citizens in our community. What do you believe are some of the rights and responsibilities that come with being active citizens?
As far as being active citizens in the political process, which I'm going to address, I'm going to narrow my focus on just being active citizens in the political process. I think it's really important that we know what's going on, that we educate ourselves about issues, and that we make our voice heard throughout the political process. From the voting booth, from writing our legislators, whether they be our federal representatives or state representatives like myself, to our local county commissioners and mayors and city councilmen, I think that it's really important that we make our voice heard.
If we as citizens wanted to communicate concerns within our community to our representatives, how would you advise us to communicate most effectively?
I think most people would be surprised at how accessible their legislators are, particularly on the state level. An email, I answer all my email myself. A phone call to my office will almost guarantee you a return phone call if you've asked for one. Most state legislators are enormously accessible to people. So I think that's probably just reaching out by whatever medium you feel most comfortable with, whether it's a phone call, if you'd rather have a phone conversation with your state legislator, or if you'd prefer an email. Either or, I think would be viable.
I saw in January of 2016 you hosted a listening session in relation to education reform. We understand your work impacts youth all over the state. As interested students, we would like to know what were the outcomes of that meeting and what do you plan to do with the information learned?
I had an education listening session at the Canton Theater to give people a forum. The Education Reform Commission had met and had come up with a lot of alternatives and a lot of recommendations. But I felt like it was really important as a state legislator to really get the feedback from my constituents, from the people actually residing in the 23rd. I was very pleased that a number of parents, teachers, educators, and other administrative professionals, Superintendent Hightower attended, a lot of folks from the school board attended, and I was really pleased that they were able to come and give their feedback on those recommendations that were put forth by the Education Reform Commission. So I hope whenever I'm moving forward in education, whenever the state legislature is considering any kind of education legislation this session, I'll have that information and I'll have that toolkit and I'll be able to reach out to those folks if I need clarification or if I have a question about something. I'll be able to reach back to them and ask them for clarification so I can take the ideas and views of the people that live in the 23rd and bring that information and that viewpoint to the Gold Dome.
When a matter is brought to your attention in regards to voting on a bill, what guides you to vote yes or no on a bill proposed to become a law?
I think I always try to do the best thing that I think is the best for the state. Every vote I cast, I think it's the best thing for the state. So that's my guiding principle.
Many of us live in communities where it is dangerous to travel if you don't have a vehicle, effectively leaving us landlocked with limited access to stores and parks. If I wanted to diverse transportation options in my community, such as sidewalks and bike lanes, how would I drive to change that?
Well, the first thing you would need to do is approach your county commission. A lot of our transportation is funded through the LMIG grants, which are our local grants to local county commissioners. They would probably need to do a needs assessment to assess the viability. A lot of times alternative transportation, sidewalks, that sort of thing are very much more attractive for building purposes whenever there's a dense concentration of population. But in some of our more rural areas, then sometimes building a sidewalk that's going to serve 5 households is not necessarily all that viable. So sometimes that viability is a crucial issue there.
The youth have an understanding of technology and effectiveness in society. One question from the Girl Scouts STEM group who focus on robotics and engineering is, what are your thoughts on child-proof locks and how can we educate younger Girl Scouts about the importance of these devices?
Child-proof locks as a result of what kind of child-proof locks? Child-proof locks for doors, child-proof locks for cabinets.
Child-proof locks for
As
doors.
somebody who's been a mom, there's a lot of child-proof locks out there. I think education is the key as far as child-proof locks, as far as doors are concerned, because obviously if it's a doorway to a stairwell or something like that, you obviously don't want your child tumbling down those stairs. So, I think education is the key.
What was the first bill that you instrumental in passing?
The first bill I carried was HB. It was House Bill 480. If it's a House bill, then it's called HB, and if it's a Senate bill, then it's SB. So naturally, as a member of the House, all my bills will be HB. The first bill that I carried was HB 480. As a former child advocate with the prosecuting attorney's office, there's a laundry list of people if a judge closes a courtroom as a result of somebody under a minor child testifying about a sexual offense like child molestation. There's a laundry list of people who are allowed to remain. The defense attorney's secretary can remain, the court reporter can remain, lots of people can remain. Unfortunately, the child advocate was not on that list. So the one friend that that child had, whenever they were testifying about the most awful thing that had happened to them, got booted from the courtroom. And that really, I didn't think was the best interest of Georgia. So I added child advocate to that list so the child advocate could remain in the courtroom when that child was testifying about the most awful thing that had happened. So he would still have a friend in the courtroom whenever he had to face down the person that had done these horrible things to them. So that was the first bill that I passed, and it was signed into law by the governor.
What issues are you currently working on that are most important to you?
My most important issue this year, I've been appointed to 2 new committees, so I currently serve on 7 committees. I serve on Judicial Non-Civil. I'm Vice Chair of Juvenile Justice. I serve on Transportation. I serve on Rules. I serve on Public Safety Appropriations as well as the General Appropriations. I serve as the Secretary of Budget and Fiscal Affairs Oversight, and I'm also on Information and Audits. So I have a lot, I'm very busy with my committee work, so I'm trying really hard this year to keep abreast of all the information on my committees, all the bills before my committees. Medical marijuana is going before my Judicial Non-Civil Committee. We actually have 2 hearings on that next week. So really, for me, concentrating on my committee work and trying to make sure that that stays ahead and goes apace. And you know, I know all the bills that are coming up and am read up and know all the background. So that's my focus this year. There's a couple of bills that I may consider carrying later, but right now that's what I'm focusing on is my committee work.
Okay, thank you.
We noticed that you're a very active representative, and you participate in several committees, such as the Secretary of Budget and Fiscal Affairs Oversight, and the Vice Chairman of Juvenile Justice, and a member of the Transportation Committee, and several others. What led you to get involved in these committees?
Well, transportation is crucial to Cherokee County. You know, we have the hot lanes that are going in. It's a very crucial issue. And whenever you join the House, you get to request certain committees. But it's at the discretion. There is a committee, the Committee on Assignments that meets, that will determine who gets what committees. So that was something that I had requested transportation, and I was placed on transportation. Judicial Non-Civil, obviously, with my background in criminal justice, was very crucial to me. So I wanted Judicial Non-Civil, and Juvenile Justice is also one of our judiciary committees, which also handles a lot of similar issues to Judicial Non-Civil. So you'll find there's kind of a theme to some of the committees that I serve on. I also have a degree in finance and do business consulting, so hence the Budget and Fiscal Affairs Oversight and Information and Audits, because I do adore numbers and I like numbers crunching and that sort of thing. So, you know, I try to keep a good balance with the talents and skills that I bring to the House and the utilization.
Which committee do you find most rewarding?
Well, I've never been on juvenile justice. I was just recently appointed, so I've never actually been to a meeting where I was a committee member on juvenile justice. I've never actually been in rules yet. So I think right now it's probably a little too premature to say which committee is my favorite.
Well, Representative Ballinger, we appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule today to meet with us to discuss Girl Scouts, how they can make a difference in their community by being active citizens, as well as learning about developing a political career. Our work here today in this interview has helped junior Girl Scouts earn their Inside Government badge. Thank you for your insight that you have provided to inspire the next generation of Girl Scouts in becoming active citizens and pursuing a career in politics.
Well, thank you.
We would like to thank all the viewers for tuning in to Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta YouTube channel. And thank you for watching the interview with State Representative Mandy Ballinger, brought to you by Miss Media Group. To learn more about Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta, visit our website at girlscoutsatl.org.
So hello, I'm Christiana Dole, and I'm a Girl Scout cadet. I've been in Girl Scouts for about 4 years.
And I'm Eula Dole, and I've been a Girl Scout for 3 years.
And thank you so much for having us today.
I am so excited that you ladies are here, and you know, it's always a thrill to have visitors, especially ones that are in Girl Scouts. One of my favorite organizations.
We're excited too. Well, as you know, many women have been positively impacted by Girl Scouts. 64% of U.S. female leaders were Girl Scouts, including former Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin and Hillary Rodham Clinton. So, were you a Girl Scout?
I certainly was a Girl Scout, yes. I was a Girl Scout in Alexandria, Virginia. Some of my best memories started in the brownies and sold the cookies, and you know, it's a wonderful organization, and I think was as you suggest, by the names of elected women and leaders in our country that have been Girl Scouts. It's an excellent leadership organization for women and girls.
Yes. Definitely.
So, how has being a Girl Scout influenced your career?
Well, I think it's some of those values that you ladies espouse and that the organization espouses and that we all draw upon that can make someone a successful leader. Knowing how to be part of a team and also make plans and follow through with them, and to make friends and to do good things for others. I mean, these are all the foundations and many others that I think Girl Scouts helps nurture, that makes one a successful leader.
Yes. Well, Girl Scout Day at the Capitol has given my sister and I the opportunity to learn a lot and to meet a lot of different people in our local government. And we've learned a little bit more about how the legislative process works. So, hopefully our fellow Girl Scouts that are going to participate in Girl Scout Day at the Capitol will be able to learn a lot and be inspired to take action through meeting and listening to the interviews and learning a lot more, too, about how our government works.
Oh, yeah, and we want to encourage all of you to know that you can be an elected official someday if that's what you want to do.
Perfect.
We need more women in office. Right now we only have about 25% of the Georgia General Assembly that's female, which is obviously a lot lower than our numbers in the population.
Yeah, of
so
course.
we want to encourage you guys to think about it as an option when you're older.
Definitely. Thank you.
So, at Girl Scout Day at the Capitol, juniors will be earning their Inside Government badge. What inspired you to go inside government and become a senator?
I feel strongly that when done well and properly and efficiently, government can be really a tremendous force for good in ensuring that every Georgian or American gets a fair shot and can really rise to achieve his or her full potential. And government impacts all of our lives every day.
Yes.
Obviously, one of the most important things that we do down here, and really one of the most important things to me, is our education system. And education is such an important foundation for whatever one wants to do in life and achieve. And so that's just an example of why I think what government does matters in bettering the lives of citizens, and that's why I wanted to be involved.
Thank you.
So, you go.
All right. When juniors are earning their Inside Government badge, they think about laws that they might want to create. Excuse me. What influences you when you're choosing the legislation and the bills that you present and that you sponsor?
That is a really, really good question. There are so many things that I'm interested in and that I want to work on. One of the challenges is sort of sorting through all the things that you are passionate about to sort of try to drill down on an area where you might be able to become more expert and really try to advance policy goals. We're only here for 40 days, so you really do have to kind of pick and choose. And since we deal with hundreds of topics, you really do have to put yourself in a position where you're knowledgeable in many ways about something if you really want to sort of have a big impact on the policy. So in my tenure in state government, this is only my fourth session. I did 2 in the House of Representatives, and then this is my second one in the Senate. I've just tried to consider a couple factors. What am I the most passionate about? Where do I think I can have an impact? Where do I think there's an avenue toward success in changing policy? And sometimes I try to pick from different buckets. So I might have some things that really impact my area locally, which is I represent DeKalb County, where there might be a kind of clear path to doing something that can really improve the functioning of the DeKalb government, for example, where I really, you do need support from the whole General Assembly, but there's some deference. It's a little more complicated than this, but there's some deference given to the people that represent that area. So I can have a big impact that way. Other topics, you're going through where you're going to have to get all 56 senators and all 180 House members to support your idea in a brief amount of time. And so there's a lot of, it's just not quite as, the path is a little bit more rocky. So sometimes I might be working on some stuff that's local, hoping I can accomplish that and have more of a long-term vision toward some of the things that I'd like to do with like our education system or access for young children to pre-kindergarten education and things like that.
So, what is a typical day like for you here at the Capitol? Do you work here full time?
During the session, I do. When we are not in our legislative session, I'm usually here 2 days a week. But I have a lot of meetings around the state and in the district too, even if I'm not here. So, but during that time when we're not in session, it's a little bit more, the schedule's more flexible. But when we're in session, typically I might have a breakfast meeting or presentation or a breakfast hosted by a group. For example, tomorrow morning, Atlanta Public Schools is putting on a breakfast for those of us that represent parts of Atlanta. And advocacy groups might sponsor breakfast. There's a healthcare organization that recently had one, for example. And then, we have meetings with our respective caucuses at 9 a.m. Then we go onto the Senate floor at 10 a.m. And depending on how many bills are on the agenda, it might be fairly short, or we might be here on some days. We're here even until midnight. Wow. But that's only a few days. That's only a few days out of the 40 days.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, that's only a few of the days, right? Kind of at the very end when we're trying to get stuff done. But there's always lunch meetings, and there's a million different, people that want to meet with you, and then you're trying to work your legislation and have meetings, and you've got committee meetings where you're considering bills. So usually it's a jam-packed day. And then in the evenings, tonight I'm going to 2 different civic organization meetings.
So, how do you get input from your constituents about an issue?
A lot of them, and I encourage them to do this, call or email. They also come, for example, to these civic meetings or to town halls. I'm having a town hall with a representative next week. And so we'll try to publicize that as far and wide as possible and hope that people come. And we always want to hear from our constituents.
Great. So how can citizens track the bills that you're working on or the proposed bills?
Well, one way is I do a newsletter update. Another way is you can go on the General Assembly website and you can search by representative or senator for everything that they've sponsored. And then you can sort of look, and on that website, it will detail where that bill is in the process. Like it might say, okay, we've just had the second reading in the House, or passage was recommended by X committee. And then if there's a vote on the floor, it'll show you the vote on the floor. And you can click on the vote and see who voted yes and who voted no.
That's great. Mm-hmm. It's good that everybody's able to be involved, I guess, and understand more and see what's going on.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate the system, I guess you would say, to make change or to change the different laws?
Well, a lot of it is about, knowing the facts and policies underlying your idea and the way the system is currently set up. And a lot of it also is about relationships and having the buy-in and trust of your colleagues and really doing work as an advocate yourself with your constituents, with people around the state, with different organizations that you think might be interested in the issue, to get them on board so you can really form a coalition.
All right. And so the badge that cadets will be earning this year at Girl Scout Day at the Capitol is Finding Common Ground.
Oh, great.
Some of the steps necessary to earn this badge are discussing compromise and mediation. How do those skills come into play with difference of opinion and political affiliations and backgrounds when you're trying to pass legislation?
Yeah, I think it's very important. And our system is really, to me, set up to encourage a lot of voices, a lot of eyes looking at legislation, and a lot of compromise. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes people do get stuck in kind of their silos, and I think we should compromise probably more than we do. But I will say that there's certainly opportunity throughout the process to, in the committees, say I'm the sponsor and someone raises a concern with me, like, okay, I see what you're trying to do here, but did you consider that this might be a problem? And then I could say, oh gosh, I hadn't thought about that. So it's good to have that vetting. And sometimes even if you feel firmly about your position, even if it's not something that they just raised that you hadn't thought of, even if it's something that you thought of and you're against, it still might be a good idea to consider their viewpoint because it might have some validity.
Yeah. So what sources do you use when you're trying to change a policy? What kind of statistics do you look at?
Really from everywhere. I follow the news media. I have a lot of professors in academia that, I look at their research. There are studies. There are organizations that provide data to state legislators and keep us updated on some of these big topics. And so, the National Conference of State Legislatures, for example. So all of these are great sources for information about what's happening around the country.
Okay, and what are some of the biggest issues that face you and other representatives and senators as policymakers in Georgia and in America?
Goodness. Well, a couple of the things that I think are problematic that we need to be focused on are how to have our education system improve so that we're really preparing kids right for the jobs that are available and the kind of jobs that we want people to be able to create. There's just been a changing economy, right? So our education system needs to keep pace. We have also more of a world economy, so we need to be sure that we're taking a broad look at educating our kids for the jobs of tomorrow, really. Let's see. Another problem that I think is important is we do have a sort of rising wage gap of income inequality. That's a tricky issue. It's really tricky, but it's important and it needs to be talked about.
Definitely. So we've heard that pollution and texting laws are a big deal worldwide.
Oh yeah, those are important too.
Yes. So what is your stance on pollution regulation and texting and driving laws for teens here in Georgia?
Well, I don't think that people should text and drive. It's very dangerous. It's a real problem. Because we're seeing so many more accidents that are caused by that, and they're going to, more likely to be fatal and just everything else. So that's, we already have a law against texting and driving. Probably needs maybe some better enforcement, but it is really dangerous. And the Georgia commissioner of the Department of Transportation was actually just talking about it at a meeting I was at. So pollution, that's something that's really near and dear to my heart. I've been concerned about the health effects, the weather effects, and the climate effects of pollution and greenhouse gases for a long time. And so I've worked toward increasing access to renewable energy that's energy that isn't dirty. And I've supported the federal government's, the Environmental Protection Agency's plans to try to make our power generation system cleaner over the next decades. But of course, Georgia's suing to stop that.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Along with a lot of other states. But I'm firmly in the camp that it is difficult. If you're from one of these states where your economy has largely been based on coal mining, it's difficult and you need to figure out a way to help those folks transition to a different type of job. But that's not easy. But on the other hand, it's too important of an issue to not do anything about. And 2015 was the hottest year on record. Yeah. And the one before that was 2014. So it's, it's really a real problem, and I'm very glad that the world got together at the Paris Accords and was able to make a few steps towards, because we have to work as a global community on this issue.
So this year, ambassadors will be earning their public policy badge.
Oh, great. Okay.
Excuse me. One of the requirements for earning this badge is to learn about people advocating for change, and what are some of the ways that you advocate for change? I know for specific causes that you care about.
Well, a lot of it is kind of going back to those relationships and the people that for many topics, there are going to be folks that you can partner with. So you've got to do your research, and you've got to be really prepared, and you need to be able to make the case as a spokesperson for why the change is needed. But you're also going to want to have put together as big of a coalition as you can with other advocates and other interest groups, grassroots contact, email, trying to really going around the state to talk to different groups to just try to build support, using technology and physically knocking on doors or driving down to South Georgia are ways to try to do it.
So what do you think currently is the most important issue for girls to follow right now? That's a bill or a proposed legislation.
Well, we have one that's kind of interesting that's about paid family leave, which kind of disproportionately affects women, that I think is a really important issue that we've been pushing for a while, where people could use their leave to take care of loved ones in a variety of capacities, as opposed to losing their job if there's someone that they need to care for. And that does disproportionately affect women. So that's really a great bill. Georgia's a little bit behind in some of those protections. The U.S. is actually not good as far as a lot of countries around the world really support people with much more so than the U.S. Because like in the U.S., if you're an employer of a certain size, you can get maternity leave, but it's not paid, and it's only for 8 weeks. So a lot of other countries are a lot more generous, because some people can't take 8 weeks off work because they don't get paid if they don't have a job that's critical enough. That's well paying enough. They're not going to be able to take that kind of time off, and so it's not really easy to have a baby or have another family member that's sick. It can really put people in a bind, of both genders. Another thing that might be, I think, really good for girls, and I'm not sure what legislation is out there right now that falls in this bucket, but there's a lot of discussion about trying to get girls more excited about like science and engineering. Yes. And I think that's a great area for the Girl Scouts to be looking at, because there's so much opportunity, and we need young folks to like watch that stuff and see what the programs are and even weigh in. So maybe if you saw an initiative that was for something to try to encourage girls to go into science and engineering and math, you could even say, like, you know what, if that program was supposed to apply to me, I'm seeing that this is not that exciting, and here's why. Because you could even weigh in, and people would say, look, these are the people that we need to be talking to about whether or not that the way this is designed speaks to them.
Right, yes, and that's one of the programs that I know a lot of Girl Scouts are getting involved in with the STEM team. And
Right.
I definitely think that's important too.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but likewise, what do you think is the most important thing for you to do to really help girls now, like with education or with
Right.
protection? What's the most important thing for
the
legislators?
things that I really am wanting to work on, understanding that there are certain things you have to pick and choose. So right now, what I'm really focused on trying to do are access to early childhood education and access to postgraduate education. And, so that people can have that education that they need in order to get the type of jobs they want, which helps their economy. And then they can support their, family and all that stuff. And, we have some recommendations this year to try to make some great strides towards getting higher quality teachers in our pre-kindergarten system. I would love to see that go to 3-year-olds. And we need to come up with creative ways to fund, because it's expensive. So that's one thing that I'm working on.
Well, finally, what advice do you have for girls that are interested in getting involved in politics or law?
I think that's a great question. I hope all of you do. I'm also a lawyer, so having a mentoring relationship I always think is good, and also just kind of knowing where you want to go and keeping your eye on the prize. Also, there's certainly opportunities, just like you guys are down here, and there'll be Girl Scout Day at the Capitol. There's certainly opportunities in our office or any others to shadow an elected official for the day. Come Page, where you bring notes into all the senators and you can watch the business of the chamber from the House floor. That'd be a great opportunity to kind of learn. Tag along to some of the civic organizations in your area. A lot of citizen volunteers do a ton of great work, and they drive a lot of what we talk about down here.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, girls. We're so glad that you guys came.
Amazing. Yeah. I learned so much more. I'm interested now maybe in being a page or doing
You guys should definitely come be pages.
This is great to know.
It's a great opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we can hook you up with your senator if we have slots. I don't know if we have any slots left this year, but your senator, or someone else would have slots. It's so fun. You should definitely come. You'd both be amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've learned a lot, and hopefully this will help a lot of other Girl Scouts too learn a lot more.
Well, I'm honored. I'm honored
to
to
meet
be
you.
interviewed.
Thank you.
Thank
It's great
you.
to meet you.
Hi, I'm Aaron Keogh. I'm a cadet in Troop 14336. I'm part of Miss Media, so that's why we're doing this interview.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having us so much, Monica Caston. How do you feel diversity and inclusion helps Georgia Power?
Oh, well, that's a great question. So, my job, I'm in human resources at Georgia Power, and my focus is diversity and inclusion. And what I like to say is when you think about diversity, we want a workforce that reflects and looks like the customers in the communities that we serve. So, we're very intentional about recruiting and hiring people that reflect our customers so we can better serve them. And then on the inclusion side, it's about creating a work environment that really works for everyone that's there, that helps them be their full productive selves, that helps them come into work and express themselves as they like to do that. And so we spend a lot of time raising awareness about what are the things you like, what are the things I like, how do I like to be acknowledged and rewarded, and it may be totally different from you. So that's how we think. If we think about our customers, our communities, and our employees, we would do diversity and inclusion in all those fronts.
Oh, I read on the website that there was employee councils. Is that part of that?
Yes, that's a great, yes, we started the employee councils as a way for our employees to have another way to bring their voice to the table. It's really important for us that employees don't just show up and, punch a clock or do their jobs and go home. We want to know, are there things that we need to fix, do better, or just have a place where employees come together and problem solve. I remember early on when we started them, we were getting interesting questions that would come up at our employee councils, things that seem minor but were very important to employees. And I won't tell you where this was, but in one of our locations around the state of Georgia, one of the issues that came up was about the sodas in the soda machine at that location. So, we're here in Atlanta, we are home of Coca-Cola, so we like to have Coca-Cola products in our machines like everybody else. Well, we had some new employees who preferred Pepsi. And they raised the issue to the employee council of, why can't we have both? Do we just have to have Coke or can we have Pepsi? So that council came together and figured out how they were going to resolve it for that location. And they turned out that they have both. They have Coke and they have Pepsi. So that's a, sort of a lower level thing. But our employee councils also help us with employee engagement. What are the things that help people feel like this is a place, Georgia Power, that you want to come work, stay, and have your friends come work there as well?
Did you have any jobs at Georgia Power prior to what your job is now?
I did. One of the great things about our company is it's encouraged that you do a lot of different things, that you learn a lot about our business. We have a little phrase that we call it, you should be a student of the business. You should always be a student of the business, learning about our business. And so I had an opportunity to be, I had departments that reported to me, variety from corporate security, the folks who are responsible for physical security of our facilities, to corporate communications, the people who do PR and marketing and writing stories. I had one of the other ones was labor relations. We have a unionized workforce for some of our positions, and that's a specialty itself. So I've had a lot of opportunity both here in Atlanta and in Birmingham. I worked for about 5 years in Birmingham with one of our sister companies, and it's a great way to learn our business, to move around. And so for new employees or even people who've been in our company a while, I encourage them to be a student of the business and go try different things.
Did you have a reason that you went to diversity and inclusion?
The reason is because I love it. My story is a very interesting, long story that I will not bore you with, but I used to be a lawyer. When I finished college, I went to law school, and I practiced law for a number of years, and I did employment law, so that's dealing with people and employees and how do you get along in your companies and your benefits, all that kind of good thing. So my mindset was already around how do you make that more effective? How do you make your workplace more effective? And around the time that I left practicing law and moved into corporate America, there was a lot of interest in how do we bring more diversity into our workforce. There was a realization that in very short order, the demographics of the United States and the world, they're changing. More women right now, a lot of people don't know, the United States is 51% female. And that's just going to grow and grow, and we are becoming more majority minority. The majority of folks in the U.S. will be from traditional minority groups. So as those things start happening, you can't wait for that moment when it happens to say, oh, I've got to make sure that I have a workplace that works for all those different different people. And so it was very natural for me to take my love of an effective workplace with this new trend, not trend, but this new reality of the shifting demographics and put it together, and it was like, it was meant for me. I love what I do.
That's interesting because I'm aspiring to be a lawyer when I grow up. So
I'll give you all the insights. The few that I know, right?
this reminds me of Girl Scout Day at the Capitol.
Oh, yes.
Which is where they meet all the political figures that they get in, and it helps girls kind of understand how our government works and how it helps everyone.
Yes.
And kind of gets them in touch with our country. How does your job work?
So one of the opportunities that I do have, so in our organization, I am a part of human resources. We are the people, I like to say the people side of the business. They're the folks that a lot of people see in the bucket trucks and out that kind of keep the lights on. They're on the operations side of the house, we call it that. And then you'll have people who are on the financial side who keep up with our taxes and our revenue and all the monies coming and going. And then there are those of us who are on more on the administrative side, and I'm in human resources on that side. But one of the great things it does allow me is the opportunity to be engaged in our community, and that's how I came to be a part of the Girl Scouts organization and have participated in Day at the Capitol. And so I really look forward to that opportunity.
So you work for Georgia Power, so there must be engineers there?
Yes, lots of engineers. Our catchphrase is we are a company of engineers. So lawyers like myself, we're a company of engineers.
When are you lobbying for women engineers?
Oh, that's a great question. I talked a little bit earlier about the shifting demographics and more women in general, which translates to more women going to college, getting degrees. And one of the ways we try to lobby for women in engineering is through another group that we manage. We mentioned employee councils earlier. We also have a program called employee resource groups. And you can consider them sort of like clubs, if as it were, and they are groups of employees organized around various dimensions of diversity. So for example, and they all have their own names. So one may be Amigos, which is our Hispanic Latino employees. One may be Voice, which is our African American employees. Well, one of the very interesting ones that we have is called TWIG, which is an acronym for Technical Women in Georgia. And this is female engineers that are focused on not only developing themselves, helping each other be successful and move and grow in our organization, but they spend a lot of time on engaging activities that will encourage young women like yourself, or even women who are already in their careers or thinking about college or what have you, to consider a career in a STEM-related field: science, technology, engineering, and math. And so we partner with organizations like the Girl Scouts, and we do activities through that group. And I think it's in October, there's Engineering Week, where we are pretty much at most of the high school, not most, but a lot of the high schools in the metro Atlanta area, where we're showcasing our female engineers. Because what we found is for a lot of young women like yourself, they might not have seen or met a female engineer, so they don't know what they do, they don't know what it looks like, what do I need to study, how would I go about being an engineer. So we do spend a lot of time, I call it doing the front end work, to try to get young women interested in being in the engineering fields. They may or may not work for us. We hope that they do. We hope that they like what we offer and that Georgia Power is a great place for them to want to work. But we think it's just as valuable to do that investment in creating that larger pool of female engineers. And maybe they don't start out working for us, but a few years down the road, we may be exactly where they want to work. So we definitely believe in the work that it takes to get more women into engineering.
I see how it shows that the girls that it can be done, and that engineering isn't just for males.
Exactly. And I love the opportunity for just the one-on-one, sort of like what we're doing. What we find is If you put and they're usually, I have to acknowledge, a lot of them are very young, and so they kind of relate to young women like yourself very well. And they're wide open. They answer whatever questions come up. They talk about their day-to-day. They talk about how they balance work and family. They talk about their commitments to the community, just what's a day in the life of a female engineer at our company. And really going through the options for what are the different jobs you can do. Because I think I was surprised that engineering is not just one thing. It is across a wide spectrum of functions in our organization. But what they have in common, which I didn't know until I started really getting interested in encouraging women to go into engineering, the creativity, the innovation that's required. If you think about what we do, we provide electricity for the state of Georgia. And that's our responsibility. It's our accountability to the state. And we've got to continue to be creative and innovative about how we do that. You might have seen some of our commercials around electric vehicles and solar and all the great ways that we try to bring cost-effective, as cheaply as possible, electricity to the state of Georgia. So the smart people, the engineers who know how to do that, we need them thinking about that and getting creative about that every single day. And so it's the one thing that I would say I learned from listening to the women talk about what their jobs are. They all say, no 2 days are the same. No 2 days are the same. And that can be exciting for a lot of people.
I can relate to all the jobs being different because my dad's an engineer. My brother's kind of like going towards it. He's in robotics and stuff.
Oh, wow.
I'm in robotics, but I'm more doing like the notebook and like keeping track of their progress and all that. And like I can see that some are more technical, like the programming, and somebody else might be like working on seeing how all the parts can work together.
Exactly. So see, there's so many roles to play, even in just that robotics piece. So that's why you want to be a lawyer. You're around engineers all the time. You want to do something different.
I'm looking towards environmental, though.
We have a lot of environmental engineers. I mean, you think about our impacts on the air, the water, the soil, and those are specialties, all within the environmental department.
What are your experience trying to influence the policy of diversity and inclusion and all of that?
Well, I will tell you, that is a lot of the work that we do is really trying to find your common ground. I would say I found whenever you're trying to influence someone, two really important things. You have to come from a place of credibility and trustworthiness. You can't have your first meeting be, I want you to do something for me. There has to be a background. You have to have done some groundwork that says, you can trust me. I'm going to bring you reliable, factual information. I won't mislead you, because you have to have a base there. So I've always found that if I'm trying to influence or have influence or convince someone to do something, it's extremely important that I start from a place of having built that confidence with them. It just makes it that much easier because we start from a place that we've got some history. We've got a little bit of good, solid history. And particularly when you're talking about public policy, things that are going to impact the public at large, a large number of people, you have to be known as the entity, the person, whoever you are showing up, that you're going to bring facts and truth, even when that hurts your position. And that's the hardest thing to do, is to say, here's what I need, but let me tell you the other side of things, because that's how you build the trust. You know that when I show up, I'm going to give you the whole story, even if it doesn't help me sometimes. So to me, that has been very successful. If I start from I spend a lot of time building, nurturing relationships, and bringing facts and information so that when I do have a need to ask for something, I'm not starting from square one.
Yeah, I've read that nothing's worse than a group and then an untrustworthy relationship.
That's exactly right. It's poison. It's poison. It's over. If I can't trust you, I've tuned out from the very beginning.
So have you ever seen how not having trust works against you?
I think it can work against you. I tend to be a glass half full kind of person, so I view it as an opportunity. How do I turn that around? And it's funny you asked that question. I had a meeting this morning with some people who were new to me. They're in our company, but they were new to me. We were meeting each other for the first time. And it became very obvious that they had some preconceived ideas about who I was, what I did. And I just stopped the meeting and I said, please let's be transparent. Please let's be transparent. Let me tell you where I'm coming from, and please know that there's nothing you can say in this meeting that I'm going to hold against you. And I know that it's going to take time for me to prove that to them. You know, it's not going to happen immediately, but I have to keep showing them, and even just putting it out on the table is huge for me to acknowledge that I know you're coming from a place that may not be totally trusting of where I am and what I'm trying to do, but I want to put that on the table. So I find that for me, transparency tends to work because, as I like to say, I only have one truth. I cannot remember a whole bunch of different stories. There's only one story, and it is the truth.
So you mentioned earlier having worked in other places. Have you worked in places where there's little to no diversity and inclusion?
Yes, I have, and thankfully, you know, things are changing. That's very hard to do, and the diversity I'll speak of is what I know personally, which is gender and race. So, as an African American woman in the United States, I'm not from Georgia. I grew up in Louisiana. And I had the opportunity to go to different schools, be parts of different organizations. Like even when we were talking earlier, I was in the orchestra when I was in high school. And there was not a lot of diversity in the orchestra. And so what I tend to do is I just come with who Monica is, my true, authentic self. And for the most part, that works. I won't say it's easy because there's a lot of affinity that happens when you are with others who are like you. That's your natural tendency is if you go to a party or a park or wherever and it's a lot of people that you don't know, we tend to want to sort of gravitate to people who look like us. But I always caution people, don't do that because you'll find when you start talking to folks, you have more in common. I was at a meeting, I was in Chicago, and people I didn't know, and so started doing the bad thing where I gravitated, not bad, but just the natural thing where I gravitated to the person who looked more like me. But then as we started talking and someone else joined the group, well, the other person and I had more in common because we liked the same sports teams, we liked the same kind of food. You know, as we started talking, that's who I had more in common with. Didn't look like me, was not from the same place. And that's what we try to raise awareness about in diversity and inclusion, because that's the reality is just looking like each other is only a little piece of the pie.
So it's kind of like don't judge a book by its cover.
There you go, exactly.
So I had a similar experience where, as I said, I'm in robotics. So, but originally I was with my brother's team, so there's a bit of sixth graders scattered about. I did the notebook for them, and they were like all 8th graders, so they left soon after. So I had trouble finding a new team. So originally, because there's not that many girls in robotics, I went to the girls in the group, and there was like 2, so I stayed with them. And then Nick, he's a 6th grade boy, so he's one of those. So the teacher, he kind of encouraged us to let Nick join the group, and he's turned out a really valuable member of our team.
See, you cannot judge a book by its cover. Perfect example. See, you can come do my job.
Thank you so much for having us. That's all I have to ask.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. And best of luck to you on robotics and everything else that you do in the future.
Hi, my name is Callie Sones, and I'm a junior from Lilburn, Georgia. I have been doing Girl Scouts for 5 years. Something I really like about Girl Scouts is how we're taught to conserve the environment. Today I'm here with Leah Dixon. Hi, Leah.
Hi, thanks for having me here, Callie.
So, what do you do in the Georgia Conservancy?
So I am the Georgia Conservancy's Advocacy Director. The Georgia Conservancy is a nonprofit that is dedicated to preserving our land and water in the state of Georgia, and our mission statement is to provide a Georgia where people and the environment thrive. And as the Advocacy Director, I am I go down to the Georgia State Capitol during the legislative session and advocate for those issues to conserve our land and water in the state of Georgia.
So what are your issues, and what are you doing to push the issues into your favor?
So our main issue this legislative session is to create the Georgia Legacy Trust Fund, which would be a dedicated source of land conservation funding that would go through the state to acquire priority lands in the state of Georgia.
So what exactly is land conservation?
Land conservation is basically preserving a piece of land, whether it's forest land or a river, to preserve that so there's not development or buildings that go in, and future generations can enjoy that property as we do today.
Well, have you ever been to any other countries, and if so, what's their government like? Any rules, regulations, anything else that's very different?
Yeah, so I have been to Paris, France a couple of times, and actually on one of those trips was able to sit in a session of a committee of their parliament. What I noticed, the difference between their parliament and our General Assembly in the state of Georgia, is that they have a lot more strict traditions. The state of Georgia has a lot of traditions, but they're not as formal as the French Parliament may be.
What does it take to be a lobbyist or an advocate for a special cause?
So as an advocate for the environment, it takes going down to the Capitol, speaking with our state representatives and state senators, just to advocate for sound environmental policies, whether that deals with land or water or air. We make sure that legislation and bills that are going through the General Assembly don't harm the environment or have any adverse effects that may be unintended consequences of that legislation. So we kind of monitor everything and make sure that there are no harmful environmental impacts.
So do any lobbyists or advocates such as yourself need to be certified?
Yes, so all lobbyists in the state of Georgia are registered lobbyists. We have to register with the Ethics Commission and report any the interactions that we have with our legislators. So everything is very transparent in the state of Georgia.
Hypothetically, if toxic waste is dumped next to a farm, what laws, rules, or regulations would you propose in this situation?
That's exactly what I work to advocate against in the state of Georgia. The Environmental Protection Division, which is an agency of the state, has very strict rules and regulations on where hazardous waste can be dumped. To dump hazardous waste, you have to have a permit, and you have to go through the permitting process with the Environmental Protection Division. So anytime we hear of any kind of hazardous waste dumping or solid waste dumps, we usually go to the Environmental Protection Division to make sure that the correct permits are in place, and that everyone on that end is doing everything they can to protect the farmland or wherever.
So what message would you say for girls who want to be an advocate or a lobbyist when they get older?
I would say continue to be involved in your state or local government. It's always a great thing to learn how the legislative process works, and that's kind of how I got into lobbying. I was involved as an intern after I graduated from college with the General Assembly, and from there I learned what the actual roles of lobbyists are. In the state of Georgia, we work to educate the legislators on all of our issues. And I just I think it's very important to stay involved in your government and learn from your experiences.
Well, thank you so much for coming here today.
Thank you very much. I had a great time. I love the Girl Scouts. I'm a former Girl Scout myself.
I'm a Girl Scout right now.
I guess I'm a Girl Scout for life. Thank you very much.
Thank you.